Dispatchers help callers on the worst days of their lives. For over 25 years, we've been there. A silent partner in millions of calls thanks to our redundant and diverse networks that ensure call delivery. Today, cities are bigger, traffic more congested, and the challenge is more complex. But you're never alone, because InDigital is quietly improving, implementing, and driving the next generation of 911, so you're supported in every situation. Make the switch at indigital.net.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
So one of the type of call that's always kind of gotten to me was kids finding their parents passed. So there's been a couple different calls, and I've the very first one I remember like vividly was it was around Christmas time, because that's when a lot of the sad calls come in. And It was a mom and her 2 daughters had come home, and they found their dad had hung himself. And mom and the oldest daughter walked in first, and the younger daughter was kind of trailing behind. I don't know how old they were. But the oldest daughter is the one that I took the phone call from. And she was saying how, she's hysterical, obviously. Mom's inside and she's outside with her little sister. And I just remember talking to her, waiting for Law to get there, or all the first responders really. And I just remember Kip saying, just stay out there with your little sister. I know it's really hard. I know you want to be with your mom right now, but we don't want your sister to have to see what you just saw. Let's try and protect her. And she's like, I said, you're a big sister.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader in next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to subscribers of the podcast, because I wouldn't be able to do everything I do if it wasn't for all of you, but especially all of you who are here watching, listening, supporting, and sharing. So thank you so very much. Got a lot of things coming up, and it is, I don't know, it's like the 14th or something today of January. I don't know when this episode is going to be coming out, but I am super excited to be here. So many powerful episodes. I am partnering up once again with the North Carolina State 911 Board, and I am out here currently in New Hanover County in North Carolina. And yesterday we did the communications course, had a lot of fun with everyone. And now today we are going to be recording a set of episodes, and then I'll be headed out to Hendersonville. So my first guest today is Angela, and she is a 911 professional with New Hanover County 911. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing all right. My voice is actually okay after yesterday. When I left from being with all of you, my throat was killing me. And then at first I thought, there were so many people sneezing yesterday that I wonder if I got something, because everyone started sneezing. It's like it started with one person, and then it seemed like it started to move around, and everyone was sneezing. And when I got to the car, I started sneezing as well. I was like, no way. It's like we must all just be, it's like when someone yawns,
right?
And then everybody else yawns. And because today I feel great, but my throat was not the greatest afterwards. And I thought, I think it's just because I was just talking like crazy all day yesterday, but I had a lot of fun with you guys. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And it was good to be able to hear your stories, but also some of your ideas and everything about communicating with each other. So you've been in the profession for about 20 years now, right?
That's correct. Yes.
How did you get started in 911 to begin with?
So I graduated college and had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I've always been interested in emergency services. I wanted to
Mhm.
be a firefighter for a while, but realized I didn't really want to get in that kind of shape. um, but a childhood friend of mine was a police officer, and she said, "Hey, why don't you look into dispatch? You always know what everything that's going on, so why not, push into that?" She knew that I shouldn't be a police officer because I'd probably shoot somebody, like just out of frustration. So she kind of encouraged me. So I had no idea what I was doing. Went in California, which is where I started. You had to take a post test. I went and took the post test. Again, zero clue.
Mhm.
Applied for a ton of different agencies and got hired. So I did do sit-alongs with other agencies, so I had an idea, but truly went in with no clue of what I was getting myself into.
Oh man. Okay, so going in there for some of those sit-alongs and stuff, was there anything that like surprised you or that was eye-opening or this is kind of like TV or nothing like TV?
I honestly hadn't really watched a lot of TV
Mhm.
shows. I mean, this was back in 2004. There wasn't a whole lot of, I don't think there were any dispatch shows on at that
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
I mean, I grew up watching Chips. That was my knowledge, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, it was all just kind of deer caught in the headlights. What is going on? Why are these noises everywhere? Why are these colors on the screen? I did try and ask a lot of questions,
Mhm.
but truly, you don't really know what you're doing or what you're getting into until you're sitting there listening.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so I have to ask though, during those sit-alongs, was anything going on? And the reason I ask is because I remember in a lot of sit-alongs that we had when we had new folks that were coming in that were thinking about working there at our agency, nothing was going on. They were there for 2 hours and nothing is going on, and they would say, "Whoa, this seems pretty easy. Like it doesn't look like there's a lot going on." I was like, "No, this is not a true depiction of what it's like when it's going to hell."
Right.
So, what was it? Do you remember what it was
It
like
was
for you?
exactly the same. And
Oh,
of
was it?
course, I went in like when it would have been busy,
Mhm.
when there's nobody sitting there. I was there on evening hours, kind of at that agency. It was really busy between like 4 and 9 p.m. And that's when I went in and nothing was going on. I mean, why would there be?
It's
Because it's like
true.
they wait until there's nobody there trying to learn about it.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
So you end up getting in. I mean, you go through the interview process and everything. About how long did that take?
For the agency that I got hired with, it took
Mhm.
months, probably like 6 months. And when it came down to it, I was in I was in the process with another agency, and the agency that ended up hiring me called. Like, he was like annoyed. He's all, "Why are you going through this process?" I said, "Well, because you guys are taking forever." And he said, "Oh, did nobody tell you to take this long?" I said, "No. Yeah, I mean, I'm new to this." So
Yeah.
that kind of sped up their process to because I would have gone with the other agency that was hiring me. Um, and then in the end, it worked out.
Man. So
Yeah, it's a long
you
time.
that is a long time. I thought my 2 months when I was telling you guys yesterday about my story was long. 6 months is a long time too, because also, I mean, if you're so did you still have you were still working somewhere currently while you were trying to get this other
Yeah,
one? Okay. I
yeah.
was going to say, because if you're like in between jobs and you're waiting and you're still looking, like what happens if you find another job during that time and then those 6 months pass completely and they're like, hey, do you still want the job? Now you're left in the position of, okay, this is what I wanted. I was taking this one just because I
Yeah.
needed to get a paycheck or whatever. And now what do you do? It's like, hey, 2 weeks notice, I got this other one.
Well, and in California, that happens a lot because
Mhm.
throughout the years, I've been on hiring boards and whatnot with that agency, and that happens a lot. They take so long that people find other jobs. I mean, they do try and expedite it, but their background and their hiring process is extremely thorough, which is so when I came here, it was surprising that it didn't seem thorough at all. But I mean, what am I going to do for 18 years as a dispatcher? I'm sure I didn't
Right.
go out and hurt anybody or whatnot.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, so it's very, very thorough there. So I learned that, but I think they've done different things to try and expedite the
Mhm.
process, especially with low staffing everywhere they have to.
Right. What about what about the training? Once you got in there, you walk in, you're looking at everything. What was that like for you in the beginning?
Well, because they don't hire groups at a time, it's like
Mhm.
individual time. So luckily, someone had been hired like a month ahead of me or a couple weeks ahead of me. So I kind of could see where she's at. I did compare myself to her a lot, which was rule number 101, don't do that. But it was intimidating. I I mean, I can remember in my backyard on my days off, because it was summertime, laying in the sun, reviewing my 10 codes or reviewing the penal. We had to learn the penal code and whatnot. So that was a lot. I mean, first time I ever had to make flashcards in my life, I mean, it was a whole different thing.
Right.
So I do remember there were moments where I was like, what am I doing? We talked about yesterday going from trainer to trainer,
Mhm.
and your new trainer looking at you thinking, why are you doing it this way? And I didn't want to tell her, well, because she told me to do it that way, because I didn't want to throw someone else under the bus.
Right. Yeah.
But ultimately I did learn, like, you have to, because otherwise they're going to not, mark you down. So that was probably the most frustrating thing out of all the training. Everybody does it different and everybody has their own style. And we didn't use any of these like pro QA systems. It was, you learn how to take a call
Mhm.
and you learn what to ask and you use common sense. So it was definitely a learning curve.
I sometimes think about some of these new systems and everything that are out. If it, I, I hate to say it this way, but it sometimes throws that common sense out. And that's something you really need to have. It was, I know there's some places where they mix it well, but I'm of the same way. You started in 2004, I started in 2001, and when we were doing EMD, there were cards. And you're like flipping through the cards really fast, and you're reading and reading and reading, and oh wait, they said this, and I got to go back to a different card, and you're like, oh geez. But again, it's that common sense is something that's very much needed.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, so my last agency was law only.
Mhm.
Thank the Lord, because I could not have, I do think medical and fire, you do need the cards. But for law, so when I came here, I'm getting dinged all the time. I'm getting cued on everything, and it's very frustrating. I got on one question, it was a call about somebody they thought was going to go break into the cash machine at a car wash or whatever.
Mhm.
And I asked the question out of sequence and I got dinged on it. And I said, why am I getting dinged on this? He said, well, it's not, it doesn't matter to the call. It doesn't add to the call or whatever the thing is. I said, well, it kind of does, because I asked the time delay of the video. If it's 5 minutes later, you've got officers, I don't know what the term is here. In California, it was code 3. You got officers going lights and sirens to this call of somebody possibly breaking in. If the
Mhm.
feed's 5 minutes late, you're putting their lives at risk.
Right.
So that's the thing where it's kind of difficult. I mean, I'll take the ding at that point because I made sure my guys were safe.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
I mean, so it gets frustrating when you come from an agency that was taught how to do it by using their brain rather than read a prompt.
Right. Yes, and I think that's one of the things that some folks find tough or frustrating as well. Is that with a lot of these automated protocols or whatever that you're going through, and you have to hit certain prompts or whatever, it almost takes a little bit of that human factor out of
Right.
it. And I guess not so much free will, but I guess free choice, or just how I don't even know how to put it, but just having the ability of just saying what comes up. I mean, we all have, and maybe you agree with this as well. You have like a sixth sense type when it comes to calls. It's the
Right.
same thing about when we talk about dispatch ear, and when someone calls and it's an open line, and you're listening to everything within that environment to pick apart what it is that's exactly going on. And you just kind of have that feeling that something is going on. You send someone out, and the majority of the time, yeah, something crazy is going on there.
Right. It's kind of like when you ask, are there weapons? And they say, no. I'm
Yeah.
not allowed to ask. If I'm following the prompt, I'm supposed to move to the next question. Well, I know that no
Yeah,
is
the
not a
tone.
no.
Yes,
Exactly.
right. Yeah, that tone is there. So when you first started though, at that first agency, do you remember some of the first calls, or some of those earlier calls in the beginning that you had taken out there?
I remember some of them from training. I
Mhm.
remember walking in one day, and there we had a tactical dispatch team. So if there was like a SWAT call out, they would go out to the scene of the call. And I remember going in and thinking I knew all about the area because I didn't live too far from there. And it was just all this chaos because there was a SWAT call out and the tactical dispatchers were going out, and I remember thinking, oh, this is so cool. Like, this is very exciting. And I think they just sat in the van all night and it wasn't very exciting, but I mean, there were just things like that. And then there was one call that I remember I was in training. It was a graveyard shift. And I remember thinking, wow, like I had no idea that goes on here.
Mhm.
Or I had no idea, like, I guess I just hadn't seen that side of human beings, you know? So I was just kind of surprised. It kind of took me back of like, who could do that,
Right.
you know? So,
There's something that I've been saying lately, and it's only because I saw this meme on social media, but it really makes you think because as a kid, you don't really get it, but as an adult and you see it, you think, "Oh, damn, like it was right there the whole time." And it's gonna sound kind of weird, but um Scooby Doo,
mhm,
like cartoon Scooby Doo. Everyone's chasing around all these monsters and everything. They're doing all these crazy things and stuff. But what happens at the end when they take the mask off? All those monsters are human. And it's
oh,
the
yeah.
same thing, just like you're saying in Dispatch. Like these monsters are real, but they're
Right.
all human. And
Yeah.
and you get these phone calls. And I remember feeling the same way as you, like, geez, like this really happens. Like you see it in the news, right?
Right.
But when you're in the middle of it and you're hearing the call and you're going through the call, it's right there. And it just I remember seeing that meme and just going, oh,
It all makes
it
sense.
all makes
Yeah.
sense. It's like they were kind of telling us right off the bat, like, hey, yeah, monsters are real, but they're human.
Right. Yeah. No, it's kind of disheartening sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And so, there's those calls and everything that you went through. Now, when you ended up moving over here,
Mhm.
um, and you saw that some processes were different, and you get in. How many years have you been here specifically?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how about some of the calls that you've taken here, or maybe even as long as you feel comfortable, of course, a call that's kind of stuck with you.
So, like I said, my last agency was law only. So moving here to fire and medical really exposed me to a lot of different things. I had already had challenges with some of the calls I've taken in the past, mental health wise. So where I thought I kind of overcame them, it just kind of opened the new wound, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
Because now I'm experiencing mostly the medical calls. The
Yeah.
fire ones have not been a big deal, but it's mostly the medical calls, like having to give CPR, and I found myself rethinking everything I did. And like, so one of the type of call that's always kind of gotten to me was kids finding their parents passed. So there's been a couple different calls, and I've kind of the very first one I remember like vividly it was around Christmas time because that's when a lot of the sad calls come in, and it
Hmm.
was a mom and her two daughters had come home and they found their dad had hung himself, and mom and the oldest daughter walked in first, and the younger daughter was kind of trailing behind. I don't know how old they were. But the oldest daughter is the one that I took the phone call from, and she was saying how, she's hysterical, obviously. Mom's inside and she's outside with her little sister. And I just remember talking to her, waiting for law to get there, or all the first responders really. And I just remember kept saying, just stay out there with your little sister. I know it's really hard. I know you want to be with your mom right now, but we don't want your sister to have to see what you just saw. Let's like try and protect her. And she's like, I said, you're a big sister. Just kind of try to talk to her of like, not not trying to make her be the responsible one, of just like, hey, remember, like, not everybody needs to go through this.
Hmm.
I'm going to stay on the phone with you for all of that. And I think that was kind of like the beginning of my, like, the kid calls finding their parents past, just to this day still get me.
Hmm.
And even if they don't find them, it's, I took a call here of I can hear the kids in the background. Dad found mom had passed, she had overdosed, and I can hear the kids in the background. They had no idea what's going on, but I know that their life has changed forever. So those kind of calls, just have always gotten to me. And I've done therapy around them, but it's
Hmm.
just sometimes it's more of the cumulative thing for me rather than that one call. And that's just kind of what I've found over time. But I definitely have had to revisit the mental health stuff since I've started here because of mostly the medical calls that come in.
I can definitely sympathize for sure, and just also empathize just with all of it because you know how I told all of you I'd come from a single seat PD. Uh, we didn't do any medicals there.
Right.
So it was kind of eye-opening going back to Michigan and then finishing off my career there, especially in the county that I grew up in, and starting to do medicals. And you're right. A lot of those calls, sometimes it's not a specific call. It's just it just builds and builds and builds, and then you realize like, okay, this is a section of calls that really bother me,
Right.
and I need to work on that. And I'm happy to hear that you were aware of that you needed that, and you actually went and sought help and everything, and got whatever help that you needed as well. Because I also think that whether you have kids or not, kid calls are always hard.
Right.
And I think it's maybe just because of their innocence,
Yeah.
and maybe sometimes you kind of put yourself in their shoes as well, as we do as empaths when we're taking calls. Like, what if it was me, or what if it was one of my kids, or what if, who, whatever, to see that and then have to deal with it later on, or however they're going to deal with it. Those types of calls. What I do have to say, though, and maybe you agree with this as well, is that kid callers, probably the best callers. Maybe
Yeah.
not all the time, but a lot of times they're really good at when they're calling in, because I don't know what it is. It's like they take direction well.
Right.
But adults, there's there's the direction's not always taken.
One of probably like one of the hardest calls I ever had. A kid came home, found his mom had passed, and I was actually training someone. I had nothing to do with it other than listening, and that broke me.
Mhm.
But you're right. Like we took the law call, we transferred over to fire, and they're getting pre-arrival. And this poor kid, fire's giving them all the things that they need to do. And he's like, well, the mom was heavy, like he couldn't get her on ground. And he was probably 12, 13.
Mhm.
And she said, well, are your neighbors home? He's like, I'm going to go look. I mean, the heartbreaking part was he thought he was going to save his mom's life. But you're right. Like everything the fire dispatcher told him to do, he did. And he was, I don't want to say excited about doing it, but he was, he was falling in line, doing everything he had. So in terms of like, kids are much better because they're used to following direction. They're used to listening to rules, where parents, Lord.
Right.
Help us.
Yes. Yeah. I've mentioned this story before many times on this podcast, but one of the ones that really, it's always stuck with me. And sometimes just hearing a loud, like thud or something, it sometimes will take me back. And it was a medical call where a mom called, and all I hear is like over and over, and I'm asking her what's going on, and one of her kids was choking.
Right.
And I told her not to do that, because I was going through protocol, and in the protocol it says don't do that because it could get lodged deeper or whichever, and or hurt the kid to begin with. So I'm telling her this, and she starts yelling at me and swearing and saying, do you want me to let my kid effing die and or choke and die? And I said, no, I'm trying to help you with the Heimlich, which we did, and it ended up getting it out and stuff. But afterwards the mom was like, I'm sorry, thank you. I was like, you don't have to be sorry. Like,
Yeah.
I probably would have too. Like, you never know when you're calling 911, everything goes out.
100%. I mean, I had to call 911 within the last 2 years for there's a golf cart accident around the corner from me. I have no clue what I said to the woman. I have no clue what she said to me. I mean, everything, as soon as I got off the phone, I was like, what just happened? And this is what I do every single day for a career. And I have no idea what I just did.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I'm the same way. When I've had to call a few times, but when I was in dispatch, I think it was maybe once or twice. And the one that I remember specifically is the one where I thought I was helping by immediately giving my location, giving cross streets, and answering all the EMD before they were
Right.
asking me. Luckily, it was a county that I knew. A lot of them were friends, and the person goes, do you work in 911? I was like, this is Ricardo from Allegan. And they're like, oh, hey, what's going on? But and they were fine. But in my head afterwards, I was like, what a dick. Like, why?
Sir, I cannot type that fast. Can you hold on a second?
Yeah, it's like, I'm sorry, I was that caller.
Yeah. But we all kind of did a little bit, because I'm not sure the address, but this is a neighboring address. If you
Yeah.
face the front door, so the light, and they're like, look, lady, just let me ask the questions.
Right. It's like, hurry up and type fast in the narrative. Like, I
Exactly.
know how to do this. Oh yeah. No, there's those moments. And then you have things. I wasn't sure if I was going to bring this up, but I want to ask this only because I saw this while I was one of my stops driving down here from Indiana on I think it was Saturday. One of my stops, I was just checking, scrolling really quick before I jumped on the road again, and I saw a friend of mine share a post from someone, and it was on Facebook. Apparently, it's going all over social media right now. But someone had posted a TikTok video, and it just has a bunch of tips in case you are ever kidnapped. Yes. Two of those that were in there. One of them says that if you are able to call 911 to simply ask to order a pizza,
Don't get me started.
and and 911 will know what to do. Okay, so before I go to the second one, let's just break this down really quick. So for those who are listening right now, that is not a common practice. That's not. I mean, there might be a dispatch center somewhere that maybe has taken that or maybe just have told their dispatchers, hey, this is going around, but that's not a common practice. That's not something, that's not a protocol, that's not a standard, that's not anything. I think maybe that was on a TV show or something.
And it's been around for years.
Right. Yeah. It
Like-
always comes up around
Yeah.
this time every single year. If anything, we are trained to hear, like we were saying earlier, that tone when you ask if someone's got a weapon, they're like, well, no, we're trained to listen for tones or things that are weird that are going on. And then we start asking you yes or no questions. So if you call and you're asking for some weird things, we might tell you right off the bat, like, well, you called 911, and then maybe jump into yes or no questions, but it's not a common practice.
Yeah.
So for those watching and listening, don't depend on that. That's just something that's all over the place. People don't, that's not a common practice. The other thing that was on there was if you're kidnapped or whatever, and you are able to just dial 55 and you will be tracked.
Never heard of
That's
that.
not a thing. That is not a thing in the United States. I actually called a friend of mine who works with NINA, with National NINA. And I said, is this something new? I said, I know you guys are starting the standards and best practices this coming week. Is that something new? Because if anyone knows, it would be you. And she goes, no, that's not a thing. She's like, hold on a minute. So we're on the phone and she looks it up. And apparently it's something in the UK. So if you call 999 in the UK and you get 911 and you hit 55, it goes to police. It doesn't track or anything. It just goes to police.
Huh.
So yeah. So if you see that, call 55 here in the US, you're not going to be tracked. That doesn't work that way.
Yeah, no. And don't call me and order a pizza because I'm going to tell you the wrong number.
Right. Yeah. Because again, it's not a common practice. Now, if you're calling and you're asking and you sound weird, or we hear something crazy going on in the background, we're immediately going to know that something crazy is going on. But if you're just calling and we don't hear anything else, like, again, it's not a common practice. So I don't know what it is. It like you were saying, it comes up every year. And yeah, I don't know how many years that has been around. But it has been around for a while, because when it first popped up on social media, I was like, what? Like I remember seeing something in the news where someone had used an app or something and like it popped up on a receipt. I don't know. This was years ago. And it made the national news. So then people were like, oh, that must be a thing. And it's like, no, it's not a thing. It's just that was something that person did. And luckily the dispatcher was like, oh, there's something wrong here.
Right.
And
they got lucky, basically.
they got lucky. But yeah, it's not a common practice, but it's going around social media right now, apparently.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So look out for that.
Yay, me.
Yeah, it might be coming up. Well, I have had an excellent time with you here, talking, getting to learn more about you and hear some of your stories and everything, your perspectives on things. And I have one last question for you before we wrap up.
Okay.
And that question is, because you've had 20 years experience and everything, if you could go back in time to talk to yourself in the beginning of your dispatch career, what advice would you give yourself?
The same advice I give every new hire that I've trained over the last 20 years is pay attention to your mental health now. If you're against therapy, try and retrain your brain. And definitely, if you have a peer support team within your agency, reach out to them, get involved. Because the problem with mental health in this industry is you don't know until it's too late.
Right.
So definitely stay on top of it now. You spoke about yoga yesterday, life-changing. Or the mindfulness, as first responders are like, I'm not doing that touchy-feely
I know.
stuff.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But
I was the same way.
Yeah. But once you start doing the touchy-feely stuff, you realize it works.
Yes.
So definitely take care of yourself from the start. None of us are immune to it. We all think we are, all of us. And then by the time we realize it's honestly sometimes too late. So definitely from day one, find what you need to do for your mental health. If it's a therapist, if it's exercise, if it's whatever, make it a part of your everyday life.
Perfect. Thank you so very much
Thank
for
you for
everything.
having
This was
me.
a lot of fun doing this with you. And thank you for what you do in this profession.
Thank you for putting us out there. It's really appreciative.
It's been an experience, and one that I would never change. It's been awesome. So thank you once again. And for those of you who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you ever want to be a guest on the show, you can email us. And that is going to be the email that is on the screen right now, wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. And you can follow us on social media and support us on Patreon and such. But the easiest way to do that is to simply go to links.co/WTT podcast, and you'll find everything there: email, social media, where to hear the latest episode, where to pick up the Imagine Listening books, as well as dispatch and podcast merchandise, all of it there. Once again, it is links.co/WTT podcast. This episode has been sponsored by In Digital, a leader next gen core services. Shout out to subscribers as always. And you can see this on Facebook, YouTube, X, as well as LinkedIn Live. And there are clips on Instagram Reels as well as TikTok. And then you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone. And we will see you all in the next one.
You just listened to a Code 7 Network podcast. If you have any questions or would like to be a guest on the show, send an email to wttpodcast@gmail.com.